What if the empire you built with pride was secretly a house of horrors for the people who keep it running? In the shadowy depths of a cluttered garage, the sharp, jarring clang of metal against concrete slices through the air as a rusty wrench slips from Nia Carter's trembling hands, cutting deep into her palm. Blood pools on the grimy floor, mingling with oil stains, as the black female mechanic bites back a scream, her dark eyes darting nervously toward the manager's office. One wrong move could cost her everything: her job, her home, her ability to provide for her two young daughters. Watching from the shadows, a man in a worn jacket stands frozen, his heart pounding. That man is Ethan Cole, the 45-year-old CEO of Cole Tech Automotive, disguised as a new hire named Sam. He spent years turning his father's small garage chain into a thriving business. But today, he's about to uncover a truth that could bring it all crashing down. If this story of courage, betrayal, and redemption grips your heart, join us on this journey by subscribing to Daily Narrated Stories. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and your support means the world to us. Nia wraps a filthy cloth around her bleeding hand, her movements quick and practiced, as if this isn't the first time she's had to patch herself up on the job. The air in the garage is thick with the acrid scent of motor oil, the faint hum of a flickering fluorescent light overhead casting jagged shadows on the cracked concrete floor. "You okay in there?" calls a gruff voice, cutting through the tension like a blade. It's Sam, Ethan in disguise, playing the role of the new assistant who started that morning. "I'm fine," Nia snaps, her voice tight with pain, her jaw clenched to suppress the scream threatening to escape. "They're not exactly handing out first aid kits around here." Her words drip with bitter resignation, each syllable a testament to years of survival in a place that seems designed to break her. Ethan feels a pang of guilt twist in his chest, sharper than the rusty wrench that cut Nia. Just 4 days ago, he was sipping espresso in his corner office on the 30th floor of Cole Tech's headquarters, reviewing quarterly reports and approving budget plans, oblivious to the reality of his own garages. Now he's here, lifting a heavy engine block with Nia, watching her wince as she grips it with her injured hand. Her knuckles are pale from the effort, a bead of sweat rolling down her temple, catching the dim light like a tear she refuses to shed. The tools scattered around them are a disaster, each one a silent testament to neglect. A drill with exposed wires sparking faintly, a hydraulic jack leaking fluid in slow, ominous drips, gloves so torn they're more holes than fabric. Ethan picks up a torque wrench, its handle wrapped in fraying electrical tape, and feels the weight of its inadequacy in his hands. The metal is cold, the tape peeling away to reveal rusted steel underneath, and he wonders how many hands have bled because of tools like this. "How do you work like this?" he asks, feigning ignorance, his voice low to avoid drawing attention. Nia forces a smile, but it doesn't reach her eyes, which are shadowed with exhaustion and a quiet, simmering anger. "Welcome to reality, Sam. Our manager, Victor, says new tools aren't in the budget, while he drives a shiny new Audi." Her tone is heavy with resignation, but there's a fire beneath it, a defiance that refuses to be snuffed out. Ethan's stomach churns as he glances toward Victor's office. Through the glass, he sees the manager, a man in his late 50s with a permanent scowl, typing on his laptop, his designer suit straining against his frame. The contrast is stark. Victor's polished exterior against the grime and danger of the garage floor where Nia works, her hands stained with grease and blood, her boots scuffed and worn from years of hard labor. Nia's hands move with a practiced precision despite her injury, her fingers deftly adjusting a bolt on the engine block. But Ethan notices the subtle tremors in her movements, the way her breath hitches each time she applies pressure, the faint grimace that crosses her face as the pain flares. "You need a doctor," he says, stepping closer, his voice soft but firm. "That cut looks deep." Nia's laugh is hollow, echoing faintly in the cavernous garage, a sound that carries the weight of too many compromises. "And lose my job? I've got 2 girls at home, Sam. Rent doesn't pay itself, and I'm already behind." Her words hang in the air, a stark reminder of the stakes she faces. Ethan's mind races, picturing those two girls, maybe waiting for their mom to come home, maybe asking why her hands are always rough and scarred, why she comes home late with exhaustion etched into every line of her face. He feels the weight of his own privilege, the distance between his life and hers, and it's suffocating. The garage is a symphony of chaos. The whine of a power tool in the distance, the clatter of metal parts, the muffled curses of other mechanics as they work on their own projects. But Nia's corner feels like a battlefield, her every move a fight for survival. Ethan watches as she reaches for another tool, a screwdriver with a chipped tip, and begins working on a rusted manifold. The screwdriver slips again, narrowly missing her fingers, and she mutters a curse under her breath, her frustration boiling over. "They don't care if we bleed," she says, more to herself than to Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. "As long as the cars get fixed, they don't see us." Ethan's heart aches at her words, the truth of them cutting deeper than any blade. He thinks of the board meetings he's sat through, the endless discussions about profit margins and efficiency, the way he nodded along to cost-cutting measures without a second thought. He'd never considered the human cost, the lives behind the numbers, the blood that stained the floor of his own garages. Now, standing here, watching Nia fight through her pain, he can't ignore it any longer. He wants to speak, to promise her that things will change, but he holds back, knowing his disguise is the only thing keeping him close enough to uncover the full truth. Instead, he helped her lift the engine block, his hands steady beside hers, their movements a silent partnership in the midst of the chaos. Nia glances at him, her expression unreadable, but there's a flicker of gratitude in her eyes, a moment of connection that makes Ethan's resolve harden. He's here to fix this, no matter what it takes. Victor storms over, his face a mask of irritation, his polished shoes clicking ominously on the concrete floor, the sound a stark contrast to the rough clatter of the garage. "Nia, that Toyota should have been done hours ago," he barks, his voice booming over the noise, commanding attention. He doesn't even glance at the blood seeping through her makeshift bandage, his eyes cold and dismissive, as if her pain is an inconvenience he can't be bothered to acknowledge. "And you, Sam, get those crates to the storage room, unless you want this to be your last day." Ethan watches Nia flinch at Victor's tone, her body tensing as if expecting a physical blow, her shoulders hunching instinctively. He notices how Victor speaks calmly to the other mechanics, all white men, their laughter echoing as they work on a sleek sedan, their tools slightly less worn, their gloves intact, but reserves his venom for Nia. The disparity is glaring, a quiet but vicious discrimination that Ethan can't unsee, and his fists clench at his sides, his nails digging into his palms. He forces himself to move, stacking crates in the dimly lit storage room, the air thick with the musty smell of old cardboard and rust, his mind racing with what he's just witnessed. As he works, his foot catches on something, a rusty metal shelf tucked in a corner, its contents spilling onto the floor with a soft clatter. Papers scatter, and Ethan kneels to gather them, his heart sinking as he realizes what they are. Accident reports. Dozens of them, yellowed with age, detailing injuries that make his blood run cold. Nia's name appears over and over. Deep cuts from faulty tools, burns from chemical spills, a fractured wrist from a falling exhaust pipe, all blamed on employee error. But there are others, too. Names Ethan doesn't recognize, workers who've long since left or been forced out. A young man with a crushed finger, his report detailing a week of unpaid leave and no medical support. A woman with scars from a chemical burn, her complaint dismissed as exaggerated. An older mechanic who lost vision in one eye after a spark from a broken grinder, his file marked terminated with no further explanation. Each report is a scar on Colteca's legacy, a legacy Ethan thought he'd upheld, a legacy he'd boasted about in board meetings and shareholder calls. Then he finds something worse, a memo from Victor to corporate, dated 8 months ago. In cold, clinical language, Victor brags about cutting costs by delaying equipment upgrades and maintenance, claiming it's optimized operational efficiency. He lists the savings, new tools deferred, safety inspections skipped, protective gear deemed unnecessary, and boasts of the impact on the bottom line. At the bottom, a digital signature from Ethan's own finance team approving the plan, complete with a timestamp and a note. Commendable initiative, projected savings of $250,000 this quarter. Ethan's breath catches in his throat, his vision blurring as he reads the words again, the paper trembling in his hands. The profits his board celebrated at their last meeting. The ones that earned him a round of applause, a bonus, a sleek new watch he'd worn with pride, were built on the suffering of people like Nia. He sinks to the floor, the memo crumpled in his hand, his mind reeling. He remembers the boardroom, the polished table, the charts showing growth, the champagne toasts, the way he'd smiled as a CFO praised the efficiency of their operations. He'd been so proud, so blind. The memory of his father floods his mind, an immigrant mechanic who faced prejudice at every turn, yet built Coltech on principles of integrity and care. Ethan's father had taught him to value people above all else, to see the humanity in every worker, every customer. He'd spent long nights in their small garage, teaching Ethan how to fix a carburetor, how to listen to an engine, how to treat every person with respect. A business is only as good as the people who keep it running, he'd said, his voice rough but warm, his hands stained with grease as he worked. But somewhere along the way, Ethan had lost sight of that, seduced by the allure of profit margins and shareholder approval. Now, as he sits among the dusty crates, the weight of his failure crashes over him like a wave, threatening to drown him in shame. He takes a shaky breath, his resolve hardening. He can't change the past, but he can change the future. He tucks the memo into his jacket, his hands steady now, his mind racing with a plan to make this right. Back in the garage, Ethan finds Nia struggling with a rusted bolt on the Toyota, her hands shaking from exhaustion, her brow furrowed with concentration. The wrong-sized wrench slips in her grip, and she grits her teeth, her face a mask of determination, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Are you just going to stand there?" she snaps, not looking up, her voice sharp but with a tremor in it, a crack in her armor that reveals the depth of her fatigue. Ethan kneels beside her, his voice soft, almost reverent. "Why do you stay? In this place, under these conditions?" Nia's eyes meet his, and the look she gives him could cut through steel, a fierce intensity that takes Ethan aback. "Because 7 other garages told me they had no space for someone like me. Because some asked if I was there to mop floors instead of fix cars. Because here, as bad as it is, they know I'm good at my job." Her words are a gut punch, and Ethan feels the weight of her reality settle on his shoulders like a leaden cloak. She's not just fighting for survival. She's fighting for dignity, for recognition, in a world that's tried to erase her at every turn, a world that's told her she doesn't belong, that she's less than, that her skills don't matter. Nia pauses, her gaze distant, her fingers tracing the edge of the rusted bolt as if it holds the memories she's about to share. "My dad taught me everything," she says, her voice softening, a rare vulnerability breaking through the hardness she's built around herself. "He had a tiny shop, barely a shed, with a tin roof that leaked when it rained. I'd fall asleep under cars, listening to him hum while he worked, the smell of oil and metal all around me. He'd tell me stories about the cars, who they belonged to, the lives they carried. There was this old blue pickup, belonged to a farmer who'd bring us apples every fall. Dad would let me tighten the bolts, even when I was too small to do it right. He'd say, 'Nia, you've got a gift. Don't let anyone take that from you.' But then a big chain came, slashed prices, and drove him out of business. He died a year later. Heart attack, but I know it was the stress that killed him. Guess who bought them out?" She glances at Ethan, unaware of his true identity, her eyes narrowing with a mix of pain and accusation. "Coltech." The revelation hits Ethan like a freight train, his breath catching in his throat, his chest tightening with guilt. He remembers the acquisition, the boardroom discussions, the way he dismissed the small competitors as insignificant, a minor footnote in Coltech's expansion. Now, he sees the human cost of those decisions in Nia's haunted eyes, the pain etched into every line of her face, the scars, both visible and invisible, that she carries from a life of fighting against the odds. That night, Ethan sits in his car in the empty parking lot, staring at the faded Coltex sign swaying in the wind, its paint peeling like the layers of his own ignorance, the metal creaking softly in the chilly night air. The company his father built on integrity has become a death trap for people like Nia, and the realization hits him like a tidal wave, a crushing weight that makes his chest ache. His father's voice echoes in his mind. A business that doesn't value its people is no business at all. Ethan grips the steering wheel, his knuckles white, as a plan begins to form, a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. He can't undo the past, but he can change the future. He pulls out his phone, his fingers trembling as he types a message to Lena Patel, Coltech's legal director. I need you to dig deeper. Pull every record, every email, every approval tied to this garage. We're going to fix this. He hits send, his heart pounding, the weight of his father's legacy urging him forward. The next morning, Ethan returns to the garage, keeping his disguise subtle with just a worn cap pulled low over his eyes, the brim casting a shadow over his face. He watches Nia limp through the entrance, her hand still wrapped in the same dirty cloth, now stained a deeper red, the fabric fraying at the edges. Her face is etched with exhaustion, dark circles under her eyes, but her posture is resolute, her chin lifted as if daring the world to break her, a quiet strength that Ethan can't help but admire. She's bleeding for a company that doesn't even see her. Ethan mutters, his voice thick with emotion, his hands tightening on the steering wheel, the leather creaking under his grip. His phone buzzes, a text from Lena. Documents ready. Highly confidential. Next steps. Ethan replies, his fingers steady now, a newfound determination guiding him. Be here at 1 p.m., bring the auditor. No one else. Lena, whose parents were helped by Ethan's father years ago when they arrived as immigrants, shares his commitment to the company's original values. She's not just a lawyer. She's a keeper of the legacy Ethan's father left behind, a legacy of fairness and humanity, and Ethan knows he could trust her with this mission. Inside the garage, the day begins with Victor gathering the team, his voice cutting through the morning haze like a blade, sharp and unyielding. Corporate wants better numbers this quarter. He snaps, his eyes locking on Nia with a predatory intensity, his gaze cold and calculating. No overtime, no new parts, no complaints, especially from you. His words are a thinly veiled threat, each one laced with venom, and Nia's jaw tightens, but she holds his gaze, her voice calm and steady, a quiet defiance in her tone. I'm asking for basic safety equipment, Victor. It's the law. Victor's laugh is cruel, a harsh bark that echoes through the garage, a sound that sends a shiver down Ethan's spine. The law? You think anyone cares about a replaceable mechanic whining about conditions? He steps closer, towering over her, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper, his breath hot and sour. Keep pushing, and you'll be out on the street by noon. The other mechanics shift uncomfortably, their eyes darting away, their silence a deafening betrayal. Ethan watches from the sidelines, his heart pounding, his disguise feeling thinner by the second, the cap on his head a flimsy shield against the truth he's about to uncover. For the next few hours, Ethan works alongside Nia, witnessing her extraordinary skill firsthand, a mastery that takes his breath away. She diagnoses a fuel injector issue in minutes, her hands moving with surgical precision despite the pain radiating from her injury, her fingers steady as she works. She uses a frayed wire and a broken multimeter to bypass a faulty circuit, her movements a dance of expertise and ingenuity, a testament to years of learning under pressure. Where'd you learn that? Ethan asks, genuinely awed, his voice soft with admiration. Nia doesn't look up, her focus unbroken, her eyes locked on the task at hand. My dad's shop, she says, her voice tinged with pride and sorrow, a bittersweet edge to her words. I grew up fixing cars with him, sleeping on a cot in the corner, waking up to the sound of his tools, the clink of metal on metal, the hum of his voice as he worked. He taught me how to make something out of nothing, how to keep going even when everything's against you. But then your company crushed us. The irony stings Ethan, who remembers the acquisition of Speedfix, a rival chain, as his first big move as CEO. His financial team had called it a strategic opportunity, assuring him the small competitors were insignificant, their shops barely a blip on the radar. Now, he sees the faces behind those numbers. Nia's father, broken by the loss of his livelihood, his dreams shattered by the weight of corporate greed, and Nia, carrying the weight of that loss every day, her hands scarred from a life of fighting to prove her worth. Ethan watches Nia work, her hands steady despite the pain, her brow furrowed with concentration. He notices the way she moves, each motion deliberate, each adjustment precise, as if she's pouring her whole self into the task. But he also sees the toll it takes, the way her shoulders slump when she thinks no one's watching, the way her breath catches when she shifts her injured hand, the quiet determination that keeps her going despite it all. He wants to tell her he's sorry, to promise her that things will change, but he holds back, knowing he needs more evidence, more proof to make a real difference. Instead, he works alongside her, their movements synchronized, a silent partnership in the midst of the chaos. Nia glances at him, her expression unreadable, but there's a flicker of gratitude in her eyes, a moment of connection that makes Ethan's resolve harden. He's here to fix this, to make things right, no matter what it takes. At 1 p.m., a black sedan pulls into the lot, its tires crunching on the gravel, and Lena steps out with Maya Singh, a chief auditor known for her relentless pursuit of fraud, her sharp eyes scanning the garage as she approaches. They meet Ethan in a nearby diner, the smell of burnt coffee and fried grease hanging in the air, the hum of a jukebox in the corner playing a faint, melancholy tune. Lena's face is grim as she slides a tablet across the table, her movements deliberate, her expression unreadable. "We found everything," she says, her voice low, a quiet intensity in her tone. Victor didn't just neglect safety. He embezzled funds meant for equipment, forging signatures to cover his tracks. The money was diverted to his personal account, over $150,000 in the last year alone. Maya chimes in, her tone clipped, her words precise. Accident rates are 10 times higher than reported. Reports were altered to blame employees, and some were never filed at all. If this goes public, the lawsuits alone could bankrupt us. Ethan's rage simmers as they play a secret recording. Victor's voice, smug and dismissive, saying, "I hired a black woman to check the diversity box. She's good with cars, sure, but one safety complaint, and she's gone. Cole never shows up anyway." Ethan's hands clench around the tablet, his knuckles white, his vision narrowing to a pinpoint of fury, the sound of Victor's voice igniting a fire in his chest. The evidence is damning, a web of corruption that stretches far beyond this single garage. But it's not enough. He needs to see this through to ensure Nia and the others get the justice they deserve. Before the meeting, Ethan hesitates in his car, staring at a photo of his father on his phone, the image grainy but filled with memories. His father stands beside an old car, his smile wide, his hands stained with grease, a man who'd built something out of nothing. "What if I can't fix this, Dad?" Ethan whispers, his voice breaking, the weight of his father's legacy pressing down on him like a physical force. The fear of losing his company and the principles his father instilled in him nearly paralyzes him, adding depth to his resolve. He takes a deep breath, tucking the photo into his pocket, the paper crinkling softly, and steps out into the cold, determined to see this through, the chill of the air a sharp reminder of the stakes. Chaos erupts in the garage as the mayor arrives to pick up his luxury SUV, a sleek black vehicle that gleams under the fluorescent lights, its chrome trim catching the light like a beacon. Victor, suddenly all smiles, ushers the mayor in, his voice dripping with false charm, his movements calculated to impress. "We only use the best equipment here at Cole Tech. Integrity and excellence. As our CEO, Ethan Cole always says. But Ethan's eyes are locked on the hydraulic jack under the SUV, its frame trembling, a thin crack spiderwebbing across its base, the metal groaning under the weight. The air feels charged, the hum of the garage fading into a tense silence as Ethan's pulse quickens, a bead of sweat trickling down his back. Nia, tasked with the repair, hesitates, her instincts screaming danger, her hands hovering over the jack as she assesses the risk. She glances at Ethan, her eyes wide with unspoken fear, and he gives her a subtle nod, urging her to trust her gut, his own heart pounding in his chest. The jack emits a shrill groan, a sound that cuts through the noise like a warning siren, and Nia leaps back just as it collapses, the SUV crashing to the ground with a deafening thud that echoes through the garage, the sound reverberating in Ethan's ears like a gunshot. Tools scatter, and the mayor pales, his hand flying to his chest, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. "Someone could have died," he gasps, his voice trembling, his eyes wide with shock. Victor, panicked, rounds on Nia, his face red with rage, his voice a roar that drowns out the murmurs of the other mechanics. "This is your fault. Human error. You're fired." But Nia's voice cuts through the chaos like a blade, steady and unyielding, a fire in her eyes that refuses to be extinguished. "I've been warning you about this equipment for months. I have proof. Emails, forms, everything." Her hands tremble as she pulls a folded stack of papers from her pocket, copies of her complaints, her evidence of Victor's negligence, the pages creased and worn from being carried close to her heart. The other mechanics watch, frozen, as the mayor's eyes dart between Nia and Victor, the weight of the moment sinking in, his expression a mix of horror and disbelief. Ethan steps forward, his heart pounding in his chest, his disguise no longer a shield but a burden, the cap in his hand a symbol of the lie he's lived these past few days. "No one's getting fired today. Except you, Victor," he says, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. He removes his cap, revealing his face, and the garage falls into a deathly silence, the air thick with tension. "I'm Ethan Cole, CEO of Cole Tech Automotive." Victor stammers, his face cycling through shades of red and pale white, his eyes wide with disbelief, his hands trembling as he tries to process what's happening. "This is a joke, right? You can't be serious." But Lena and Maya step in, tablets in hand, their faces grim with purpose, their movements deliberate and unyielding. Lena turns her tablet toward Victor, playing the recording of his discriminatory words. "I hired a black woman to check the diversity box, one safety complaint, and she's gone." Maya follows with spreadsheets detailing his embezzlement, the forged signatures, the diverted funds, each number a nail in the coffin of Victor's career. The mayor, horrified, mutters, "This is criminal," his voice barely above a whisper as he steps back, distancing himself from Victor, his face pale with the realization of what he's witnessed. Victor turns on Ethan, his fury erupting, his voice a snarl. "I did this for your profits. You're insane targets. You wanted results, and I delivered." Ethan's jaw tightens, but he nods, his voice heavy with regret, the weight of his own guilt a heavy burden. "You're right. I'm guilty too. I'll let numbers blind me to the people who matter." He looks at Nia, her eyes wide with disbelief, her hands still clutching her evidence, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. That changes now. Victor is escorted out by security, shouting empty threats of lawsuits as he's dragged away, his voice fading into the distance, a hollow echo of the man he once was. Ethan turns to the team, his voice firm but laced with emotion, his eyes scanning the faces of the mechanics who've watched this unfold. "This garage is closed for a full overhaul. Everyone gets paid leave. When we reopen, it'll have new equipment and new management." He turns to Nia, his gaze steady, a quiet promise in his eyes. "I'd like you to lead safety standards with full autonomy. Every request approved, plus compensation for the risks you've faced." Nia crosses her arms, her voice hard, her eyes searching his for any sign of deceit, her posture rigid with distrust. "Why should I trust you? You let this happen." Ethan nods, his shoulders slumping slightly under the weight of her words, his voice raw with honesty. I don't deserve your trust yet, but I'll earn it. I promise you that. A week later, the garage is a construction zone. Scaffolding surrounds the exterior. Workers in hard hats unload crates of modern tools. Their voices a low hum of activity, and new signage bearing the Coltech logo gleams in the sunlight, a symbol of change. In a temporary office set up in a trailer nearby, Nia reviews blueprints with Ethan, her finger tracing a line on the paper, her movements precise and deliberate. This ventilation system won't cut it, she says, her voice firm, her eyes sharp with expertise, a quiet authority in her tone. We need 40% more capacity to handle the fumes properly. Ethan doesn't hesitate, his pen scratching across the paper as he makes a note. Done, he replies, his voice steady, a quiet respect in his eyes. Anything else? Nia leans back, her expression a mix of skepticism and cautious hope, her fingers tapping lightly on the table. Yes, the other managers. If Victor was this bad, what about the rest? I don't want anyone else going through what I did. Ethan smiles, a genuine warmth in his eyes, a flicker of pride at her foresight. You're already thinking like a leader. He gestures to Lena, who hands Nia a folder, the papers inside crisp and new. Surprise audits of all garages, for managers already removed for similar issues. And I'd like you to be safety and compliance director for the entire chain, with authority to shut down any location that doesn't meet standards. Nia takes the folder, her hands steady now, the weight of the responsibility settling on her shoulders like a mantle she's ready to bear. She flips through the pages, her eyes scanning the audit reports, the evidence of negligence at other locations, her brow furrowing as she processes the scale of the problem. This is a start, she says, her voice softer now, a flicker of trust beginning to form, a small crack in the wall she's built around herself. Ethan's phone rings, shattering the moment, the sound harsh and jarring in the small space. It's a CFO, Greg Lawson, his voice tight with frustration, a hint of panic in his tone. Ethan, these renovations are tanking our quarter. The board is livid. They're talking about a vote to remove you. Ethan's voice is ice, his eyes narrowing as he grips the phone, his knuckles white. Did you sign off on Victor's forged approvals, Greg? Because we have proof someone on your team did. A tense silence stretches on the other end, the faint sound of Greg's breathing the only response, a heavy, uneven rhythm. I didn't know the full extent, Greg finally mutters, his voice barely audible, a weak defense. Board meeting tomorrow, Ethan says, his tone unyielding, a quiet fury in his voice. Bring your resignation, or names of who was involved. He hangs up, his jaw tight, and meets Nia's gaze, her expression unreadable, but her eyes searching. This goes higher, doesn't it? She asks, her voice steady, but her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. Wherever it leads, Ethan replies, his voice firm, a promise in his words. My father built this company to help people, not hurt them. That night, Nia sits at her kitchen table, her daughters asleep upstairs, the faint sound of their breathing drifting through the small apartment, a soft, comforting rhythm in the stillness. She unwraps her hand, staring at the raw wound, the skin around it red and inflamed, the pain a constant reminder of the risks she's taken. What if this is just another empty promise, she whispers, her voice breaking, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, the weight of her past betrayals pressing down on her. Her fear of betrayal clashes with a flicker of hope, making her decision to trust Ethan more impactful. She thinks of her father, of the way he believed in second chances, his voice echoing in her mind. Nia, you've got a gift. Don't let anyone take that from you. She takes a deep breath, resolving to give Ethan a chance, but only one, her resolve a quiet fire that burns within her. The Coltech auditorium is packed, executives on one side, garage workers, including Nia, on the other. Daniel Hayes, the VP leading the charge against Ethan, announces a vote to remove him as CEO for financial recklessness. Ethan steps forward, calm despite the storm brewing around him. I have 15 minutes to speak per company rules. May I? Daniel nods, his smirk barely hidden, confident in his victory. Ethan signals Lena, who hands out sealed folders to the board. Not yet, Ethan says, turning on a projector. A photo of his father appears, standing proudly by an old car, a smile on his weathered face. My father started with nothing. He built this company on safety and respect. But look at what we've become. The screen shifts to images of broken tools, the collapsed jack, Nia's bloodied hand. This is the cost of our profits. Daniel scoffs, his voice dripping with disdain. This is emotional manipulation. Ethan smiles, a calculated gesture that sends a chill through the room. Open the folders. Inside are records of embezzlement, forged signatures, and recordings of Daniel and Victor discussing cuts to unnecessary safety measures. Nia stands, her voice steady, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. I've never spoken at a meeting like this, but let me show you something. She rolls up her sleeve, revealing a deep scar on her forearm. This is from a lift that failed. I got no care, no support, just kept working to feed my kids. You profit off our pain. If that doesn't move you, think of the lawsuits when this goes public. The room falls silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. Ethan clicks the projector. Our pilot garage, post-reform, has 30% higher productivity, 0 complaints, and a 17% profit increase. Safety isn't a cost, it's a gain. The vote is unanimous. Ethan stays, Daniel is removed, and the reforms roll out company-wide. 3 months later, Nia cuts the ribbon at Coltech's new Safety and Compliance HQ as its executive director. Every garage now has top-tier equipment, strict protocols, and a no-retaliation reporting system. Victor watches from a cramped apartment, his lawsuits dismissed, facing criminal charges. No garage will hire him, not even as a car washer. At the ceremony, Nia finds Ethan by a restored portrait of his father in the main lobby. He'd be proud, she says, her voice soft but certain. Ethan nods, a lump in his throat. Of us both. How did you manage with such broken tools for so long? Nia smiles, a quiet strength in her eyes. We adapt. We survive. Imagine what we can do with the right ones. This journey reminds us that true success isn't measured by profits, but by the courage to stand for what's right, the resilience to rise above broken systems, and the hope that justice can prevail. Ethan and Nia's story shows that even in the darkest corners, integrity can light the way, turning pain into purpose. What broken system have you faced, and how did you overcome it? Share your story in the comments. We're reading every one, and your voice matters. A week later, Coltech launches a scholarship for young mechanics from underserved communities, housed in the renovated Garage 5, named after Nia's father. Nia's daughters, now training as mechanics, graduate with their own toolkits, their faces beaming with pride. My mom showed us that broken pieces can build something stronger, one says to the camera, her voice steady and sure. Ethan watches, a new profit record on his desk, a quiet smile on his face. Sometimes, the naked truth is the greatest teacher, and sometimes it's the people society overlooks who rebuild the world. Don't miss out on more stories of transformation and hope. Subscribe to Daily Narrated Stories right now. We're on a mission to share life-changing tales that inspire, and we need you to hit 1,000 subscribers this week. Click that button, comment your thoughts, and join a community that believes in the power of stories to change lives.